This calculator is designed to estimate the carbon emissions associated with your on-premises data center. Based on these specifications, you may use the other calculators to identify comparable cloud-based virtual machines or servers, enabling a direct comparison between your current operational emissions and those of a potential cloud migration. At the top of the sheet, you will find the reporting period and summary of emissions. The reporting period indicates the time frame for your emissions reporting, such as the past year, quarter, or half year. This acts as both an identifier for your emissions data and a guide for what input values are needed for accurate calculation. To the right of the reporting period is the summary of emissions, which shows the total emissions from all inputs in the table below the instance-level emissions table. The summary of emissions for the on-prem calculator is slightly different from the others. This is because it not only summarizes emissions from your on-premises data center, but also includes the emissions summary from the other calculators. As mentioned earlier, this enables you to compare your on-premises emissions with those that would be produced if your operations were hypothetically migrated to the cloud. Looking at the table below, there are several required inputs, each coming from different data sources. Let's first take a look at the energy source and efficiency section. Under this table, you will find the following parameters: server label, grid emission factor GEF, power usage effectiveness PUE, and renewable energy used REU. The first input is the server label. This serves as an identifier for your server so that you can easily track which server corresponds to each row. Next is the grid emission factor GEF. The default GEF value comes from the latest figure published by the Energy Market Authority, EMA, for Singapore. It assumes that most services are operating within the Singapore region. However, if your on-prem DC is located outside Singapore, you can input the GEF for that specific region. To proceed, locate the equivalent grid emission factor GEF published by your country's energy authority or an equivalent body. Input this value under the user-defined column to replace the default GEF. Moving on to power usage effectiveness PUE, the first column in this section asks whether the power consumption listed under column M includes only IT loads or also supporting infrastructure loads such as HVAC and lighting. If your answer is yes, meaning the power consumption refers only to IT loads, then the data center's PUE will be required as an input. The default value provided is Singapore's national average PUE of 1.47. However, for a more accurate emissions calculation, it is recommended that you use your actual PUE and input it under the user-defined column. The final input in this section is renewable energy used REU. In line with the principle of conservatism, the default value has been set to 0%, as not all data centers have procured renewable energy. For a more accurate calculation, it is best to use the REU of your organization's on-prem data center. After the energy source and efficiency section, the next part is the operational energy use and direct emissions table. This section quantifies Scope 2 emissions based on the electricity consumed by your on-premises data center, and also accounts for its Scope 1 emissions. The power consumption in this table is measured in kilowatt hours and can be reported either monthly or annually. On the other hand, the Scope 1 emissions input is reported annually, as this aligns with how it is typically presented in company sustainability reports. Once you have entered all the required data, the calculator will generate the total emissions for your on-premises data center, expressed in kilograms of CO2 equivalent per year. Additionally, the status bar will indicate whether all inputs are complete. If it does not show complete, it means one or more cells in the previous columns may have been left blank and should be reviewed. Returning to the top section of the sheet under the Emissions Summary Report, you should now see the total emissions of your on-premises data center. If you have also entered VM data into the other calculators using similar specifications as your on-premises setup, you will be able to compare the two results side by side. This allows you to observe the emission difference between operating on-premises and migrating to a cloud service provider CSP. That concludes the tutorial for the on-prem calculator. Thank you very much for watching.